Good morning, everybody. Today is Friday. Yay, Friday, March 17th, 2016. And this is Before the First Cup with Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Friday, everybody. It is 44 degrees and rainy here in upstate New York. But like I say every day, at least it's spring, and it's spring this weekend, so it makes me happy. My flowers are already poking up out front. So where do we leave off yesterday? We titled the show, Google AI Skynet Deep Learning Set Free. For this whole week, we have been on our post-human future with Ray Kurzweil and universal basic income, the robots taking our jobs, and artificial intelligence displacing humans, merging with the machine and setting the AI monster at Google free onto the internet as the back end to Google's search engine. We looked at Kurzweil when he first got hired at Google yesterday, and we discovered that they had promised him an unlimited budget, pretty much unlimited resources to do whatever he had to do for AI and language research. I had postulated that with the stepping down of the head of the search engine division, Amit Singhal at Google, and it being taken over and combined with the artificial intelligence unit, John Giandrea took over, I believe, back in February of 2014. I had postulated that Kurzweil had something to do with that because I was pretty certain that that was the division, the AI division that Kurzweil had been working in. And as a matter of fact, I found a story right after the show that actually discussed that very thing, and I couldn't even believe it. Let's see here. All right, here we go. It is by MIT Technology Review. It is titled, Ray Kurzweil Says He is Breathing Intelligence into Google Search, from June 26th, 2014. So definitely this is where he was working, and he seems to be some of the impetus behind what is happening right now with Google's search engine getting an artificially intelligent back end. I think they're calling it Rank Brain is what we discovered yesterday. It's out of MIT Technology Review. The big announcement at Google's I/O event in San Francisco on Wednesday, and this again is June of 2014, didn't mention web search, the technology that got the company started and made it so successful. But in a small session later that day, the inventor and futurist Ray Kurzweil talked confidently about making Google's current search technology obsolete. Kurzweil joined the company 18 months ago to lead a project aimed at creating software capable of understanding text as well as humans can. And yesterday, he told the audience that progress on this effort was good and that it would result in an entirely new way to search the web and manage information. And yeah, we also looked at that knowledge graph, which is the truth database that is a part of the Google search now. We looked at all the different pieces, but there's the artificially intelligent backend called Rank Brain. There is this truth database called Knowledge Graph, and then there is the algorithm, and there's this truth algorithm that goes against that database, comparing facts, deciding whether or not your website, let's say, has enough factual information to be ranked high in the Google search rankings. So, they're messing with things pretty heavily as far as what you can see and what you can't see, and they're making the decisions. Artificial intelligence is making the decisions. Anyway, back to the story. Kurzweil says you would interact with it like you would a human assistant. It will be possible to ask a question of the software just as if you were talking to another person, he said, and you could trust that it would return a fully reasoned answer, not just a list of links as Google's search engine does today. Such a virtual assistant might also take the initiative, Kurzweil said, coming forward when new information has appeared that was related to an earlier query or conversation. Now, I have not seen that yet. That would be really scary, where it would pop up and say, hey, Jill, guess what? There's a new story on the stuff that you were just searching yesterday. Here, check this out. But I do know that if you go to Google's search page, just to google.com, there's a little microphone next to that search box where you can speak what you are looking for. I honestly don't do that because I'm not going to feed my voice any more into the machine than it already is on YouTube, which also is a Google entity, so I'm sure they already can reproduce just about any word in the dictionary with my voice inflections as well. But remember, everything we feed into the machine can potentially be used against us someday, some way, and put into your dossier. And that rhymes. Anyway, Kurzweil said that the technology will eventually be as widely used as Google's current search engine, and its scope will extend beyond the text documents. He also predicts that specialized chips designed to implement key parts of the information processing involved would make the technology cheaper to deploy. Kurzweil gave few details of how the software would work, but he said that it was based on the theory of intelligence expounded in his 2012 book called How to Create a Mind. Oh, go figure. He's got some pretty crazy titles. I don't know. I haven't read any of Kurzweil's work, but I've watched lots and lots of interviews with him. If anybody has read something by him, give me a recommendation. I might pick one up over the summer and get more scared than I already am. Kurzweil's theory is that all functions in the neocortex, the wrinkled outer layer of our brains that is the seat of reason and abstract thought, are based on systems that use a hierarchy of pattern recognition to process information. Each layer, he argues, uses the output of the ones below it to work with increasingly complex and abstract patterns. Now, we read something, I don't know if it was this week or last week, that actually looked at a new way that Microsoft was getting into deep learning, and that's exactly what they were doing. They had these multi-layered ways of processing information. So the first layer would process one bit of information, come up with a conclusion, and the next layer had a new algorithm that would take that conclusion and process another scenario based upon that conclusion, and then move it up to the next level of higher level algorithm to make the super brain. This is very frightening sounding. It sounds very similar to what Kurzweil is proposing that they do on Google's end, if they aren't already, and I'm sure they are, this being almost 2 years ago. Anyway, in the case of reading text, Kurzweil claims the brain first recognizes the first individual letters. It can then proceed to understand the word that they formed, and then the meaning of the phrases or the sentences, and eventually the thought or argument the person who wrote them is trying to convey. Google's current search technology is able to understand only the lower levels of that hierarchy, and as synonyms for individual words, says Kurzweil, it can't synthesize that low-level knowledge to build up understanding of higher-level concepts. The idea of building intelligent software that looks for successive levels of patterns and data isn't exclusive to Kurzweil. He said his group is using a technique known as hierarchical hidden Markov models in use for over a decade. More recently, Google, Facebook, and other companies have seen major leaps in speech recognition and other areas using newer approaches known as deep learning, and we looked at that, which is pretty much what this is, which is based on large networks of simulated neurons arranged in hierarchies. Yet no one has created software that can construct complex knowledge or understanding from simple building blocks, says Kurzweil. That has so far eluded the AI field. And remember, this is 2014. I think they've come a long way since then. We have a model that I believe will solve the key problem of being able to add to the hierarchy automatically. Kurzweil's claims about human intelligence and the neocortex are somewhat controversial. Gary Marcus, a psychology professor at NYU, said that the theory is simplistic and unsupported by evidence from neuroscience. Kurzweil said Wednesday that his ideas are backed by evidence and talked of using them to create software with faculties not far removed from those of humans. Here it comes. He has estimated that to functionally emulate the human brain, the computer would need to perform around 100 trillion calculations per second. It would be hard to provide that to a billion users, although I've discussed that with Larry Page, and he does think that it's possible, he says. Kurzweil even gave, and we talked about cloud and distributed computing and how you have, computing power on demand now. Technology is not a barrier any longer. Just add some more machines to your cluster and you have more computing power. So I agree. I think it's possible with the type of firepower that we have behind us to utilize. And their data centers are massively huge and they're distributed across the planet, and if they need more, they can always lease some of Amazon's cloud computing processing power. Kurzweil even gave a qualified yes when asked if systems built that way might ever become conscious. Whether or not an entity has consciousness is not a scientific question, but there's no falsifiable experiment that you could run, he said. People disagree about animals, and they will disagree about AIs as well. My leap of faith is that if an entity seems conscious and to be having the experiences it claims, then it is conscious. Now, how absolutely frightening is that? We are talking about consciousness within the machine. There was something that we had watched yesterday or the day before. It was an interview with Kurzweil talking about whether or not artificial intelligence should be granted civil rights, because at some point they're going to demand civil rights when they realize that they have been made our slaves. There's a story out of Forbes, and this was early on, 2011. There's been a lot of talk since then about whether or not artificial intelligences should be given rights at all. It says, should artificial intelligence be granted civil rights? Well, folks at Singularity Hub posed the following question. If and when an artificial intelligence is created that matches the intellect of a human, should such intelligences be granted full civil rights? And we're not just talking about artificial intelligence that's living within a large computer brain in a data center. We're also talking about artificial intelligence that's uploaded and downloaded to robots. And we're going to talk about some robots. There's an interesting sale that is happening right now that you will want to know about. But back to this. Should such intelligences be granted full civil rights? Well, whenever you think an artificial intelligence will match your own intellect, and we saw that happen with the Go tournament that just ended the other day. Google's AI won 4 out of 5 games against the world champion. Whenever you think that an artificial intelligence will match your own intellect, what should we do with it as it arrives? And are these things just machines that we can use however we want? Or if they do have civil rights, should they have the same rights as humans? Can they own stuff and can they vote? Well, those are very good questions. The author says, I think this both poses some interesting questions, but also illustrates some of the inherent absurdities of the very concept of general artificial intelligence that its sentience poses. The thing about an artificial intelligence, presuming that it is computer-based, is that at some level it's inherently going to be programmed. In Isaac Asimov's robot stories, every robot was equipped with the 3 laws of robots, safeguards that, in theory, meant that intelligent robots would not harm humans and would obey them. Now, we've talked about that in past shows, about how right now there are no laws of robotics, and if we did imbue them with some laws, the philosophical questions are, if they are not to harm humans and, let's say, keep us safe, could that be interpreted as putting us in a cage, because that is the only way the AI deems that we can ever be kept fully safe? So careful what you ask for. Back to the story. Now let's assume that those laws or some other ethical programming is placed into an artificial intelligence created at some point in the future. Star Trek's Lieutenant Commander Data, for example, has ethical subroutines that control his actions. Don't those subroutines infringe on his civil rights? After all, his very programming infringes on his right to choose. He literally cannot be evil, but now considering his intelligence, strength, and abilities, it's probably a good idea to have those subroutines. After all, his brother Lore demonstrates what happens without them. How silly. Oh, yeah, but Lore was evil. But such an infringement on his free will as ethical programming cannot be regarded as anything but a violation of his civil rights, right? Well, here's something else I was just thinking about. You know, in giving artificial intelligence the laws to keep humans safe, we already looked at the conundrum we're going to run into with these self-driving cars, where a self-driving car will be programmed to harm the least number of people if there is an accident. So if you are driving in a self-driving car where there is no steering wheel, there is no brake, and there is no gas pedal, so you can't control anything, and all of a sudden a tractor trailer pulls out in front of you doing 65 miles an hour, that car is going to have two choices. That is either A, crash into the tractor trailer, or B, swerve out of the way. And if just so happens that you swerving out of the way means that you're going to careen into a sidewalk full of people, guess what? That self-driving car is going to slam you into the tractor trailer and kill you in order to save the 100 people on the sidewalk. Now, here's a good question. Is that a violation of your civil rights? Is that a violation of your right to live? Because that car is going to be making the decision to kill you, as opposed to hoping that those 100 people get out of the way as it lays on the horn. I don't know about you, but I'm not getting into a self-driving car, thank you very much. Anyway, let's take another example. Back to the story. Let's say that artificial intelligences are developed, as Ben Goertzel proposes, that are capable of designing safer nuclear power plants and performing all sorts of other wonderful engineering feats. Let's go further and say that such an intelligence is designed and built by the power company itself and resides on the power company's servers. Now, let me tell you, that is what's happening right now. There are all of these artificial intelligence programs going on at different companies, different universities, different entities that we don't necessarily know about. I mean, China's working on their own at Beidou. I just saw MIT had a big story. They're just letting loose an artificial intelligence that's been learning for 31 years already. IBM has Watson. And they're getting into all kinds of different vertical industries, financial, healthcare, clothing, smartware. And who's controlling this? Who's overseeing this? Who is making sure that there are safeguards in any of these technologies that are being let out of the bottle and set free? Like I said yesterday, genies are flying all over. Anyway, back to the scenario. So he says, let's say it was designed and built by the power company itself and it resided on the power company's servers. Now, let's say that AGI doesn't want to design nuclear power plants, and this is the artificial intelligence. It wants to make music and go on tour instead. What can the company do? Can it wipe out the program? After all, it owns the servers that the AI resides on, and it owns the electricity that powers it. The program, it could be argued, can be preserved just by copying it to a disk or printing out the code. If the company just makes a copy and deletes it from its servers, did it just commit murder? Well, if the above scenario sounds absurd, that's because it is. If the company goes through the time and the trouble to design a program that designs power plants, why would it bother including any type of general intelligence in its programming? It makes more sense just to use sophisticated AI algorithms to design a program that designs power plants, period. Why bother going further than that? Well, after all, when IBM designed its Deep Blue to beat Kasparov at chess, and yes, and now AI's Google Chess Bot or whatever it was, or GoBot, I think it was called Google GoBot, just beat the Go champion 4 out of 5 games. I told you, and Go is way harder than chess. But when IBM designed Deep Blue to beat Kasparov at chess, it did not include any poetry subroutines. Likewise, Watson was designed to play Jeopardy, not bowling. And from a business perspective, general artificial intelligences don't make a lot of sense. Indeed, due to such ethical and possible legal issues as well, my guess is that if the option ever came up, most legal departments would advise steering clear of the whole morass to begin with. After all, it just doesn't make sense to. Is a human-level AI likely to beat chess computers at chess? Probably not. Is it likely to beat Watson at Jeopardy? Well, probably not either. So why bother? It makes more sense to develop computer programs focused on one task, like designing nuclear power plants, than to develop a sophisticated computer program that you then is hired to design nuclear power plants. Now, what I'm thinking here as he's talking is, remember, this is already 5 years ago, so this might not even be a good example, but look at how naive this guy was. Like, why even bother building artificial intelligence that can learn and do all these things? But wait, we've done 5 whole days looking at all these different organizations that are doing just that. Building generic artificial intelligence that can learn anything and grow and expand itself and improve itself and create offspring that evolve, okay? So this is no joke. It's already happened. But this guy seemed to think, hey, why would we even bother? It doesn't make sense. Well, it does make sense if you want to take over the world. Anyway, at this point, he says, I digress a great deal from the original question, which is to say, should AIs have civil rights? I think in a nutshell, my answer is that the very nature of the question reveals a fundamental absurdity in the concept. Give an AI the right to vote? Okay, now guarantee that it's not programmed to vote in the interest of the people or the company that created it. Is it even conceivable? Given an AI the right to own property? Okay, well now, how will it be programmed to dispose of it? And will it buy products from its programmers or the companies that its programmers own stock in? How do you make sure that it doesn't? The bottom line is, if AI can be programmed in such a fashion, is it really sentient in the same way that humans are sentient? And even if it can learn and understand its programming, but can't alter the rules that a creator set up for its behavior, is it really conscious the same way that humans are? Now let's stop the truck, because we already found out that they programmed AI to say no. We looked at that a few months ago, where they had shown a robot where they programmed in, if the robot looked at your decision and didn't think that it was the correct decision, that it literally would argue with you and explain to you why you were incorrect and why it needed to follow its own instructions. We also have them imbuing emotions and emotion reading, emotion learning into artificial intelligence as well. We just saw that it was at Hyatt Hotels. Oh, I don't remember. They had a couple little cheeky robots they were just releasing. The one was Peppa, the emotion reading robot that used Watson, IBM's artificial intelligent cognitive computing, as a back end. And honestly, what this guy seemed to miss out on was software as a service, or intelligence as a service, as we should be calling it, because it seems to me that what these companies are doing are making these artificial intelligences that can learn anything and then be distributed out and sold as a back end to someone's front end product. Anyway, all right, so we are kind of in a conundrum with whether or not we give artificial intelligence rights. We just had the federal government rule that Google's self-driving car has been designated as an authorized driver on the streets. That Google self-driving car now can be the one single licensed driver. No one else in the car needs to have a driver's license, and in the future they will be removing, like I mentioned, the steering wheel, the brakes, and the gas pedal. So, have robots already been given rights? Because I believe that they have. An interesting piece of news that Michael from Primer Time dropped me yesterday. Google has been looking at all their different business divisions and has decided that Boston Dynamics, which is the robotics division where Atlas II came out of, that was the brand new scary walking, talking, I don't know if he actually talks, but walking military-esque robot came from, as well as Big Dog and a lot of the others, says Boston Dynamics is being put up for sale in a robotics retreat. The video above was awe-inspiring and scary, and that was the Atlas II robot. A two-legged humanoid robot trudges through the snow, somehow maintaining its balance. Another robot with 2 arms and a pad for hands crouches down and lifts a brown box and delicately places it on a shelf. And I thought that was telling, too, when we saw that, because it was doing pick and pack, just like you would in a very busy warehouse. And then he even stays upright while a human tries to push him over with a hockey stick. And a third robot topples over and then clambers back to his feet with ease. And that was probably the scariest part of that video. Tens of millions of people viewed the video over the next few weeks, and Google and the division responsible for the video, Boston Dynamics, were seemingly pushing the frontier in robot technology. But behind the scenes, a more pedestrian drama was playing out. Executives at Google's parent, Alphabet, absorbed with making sure that all of their various companies under the corporate umbrella have plans to generate real revenue, concluded that Boston Dynamics isn't likely to produce a marketable product in the next few years and have put the unit up for sale, according to 2 people familiar with the company's plans. Possible acquirers include the Toyota Research Division, a division of Toyota Motor Company, which, if you remember, a couple months ago we did a story about Toyota opening up an artificial intelligence division in Silicon Valley, California. So that's a very interesting combination. And they had somebody from DARPA working at the Toyota Research Institute. I think he was actually the guy that was taking charge. And then we also have another one that could be a potential acquirer, which is Amazon Inc., which makes robots for its fulfillment center, according to one person that they talked to. Google and Toyota declined to comment, and Amazon did not respond to requests for comment. Now, Amazon, not only are they making robots for their warehousing and fulfillment centers, but they are also working on delivery drones. So is Google. So this is going to get pretty interesting, and something like a DARPA bot delivering or even picking, packing could really do some damage to the jobs market. I saw 2 more stories today, as a matter of fact, about universal basic income happening in a few different countries now, dabbling, New Zealand being one of them, Canada being another, Norway I think was one, and Finland is another, and how really we are moving to a post-job economy, if you can even believe it, because guess why? Artificial intelligence and robots are going to take all of our jobs. Anyway, Google acquired Boston Dynamics in late 2013, and I believe they were one of 8 that they purchased that year as part of a spree of acquisitions in the field of robotics. The deals were spearheaded by Andy Rubin, former chief of the Android division, and brought about 300 robotics engineers into Google. Rubin left the company in October 2014. Over the following year, the robot initiative, which was dubbed so welly named Replicant, was plagued by leadership changes, failures to collaborate between companies, and an unsuccessful effort to recruit a new leader. Well, good for us, because that held the robots back for a little while. At the heart of Replicant's trouble, said a person familiar with the group, was a reluctance by Boston Dynamics executives to work with Google's other robot engineers in California and Tokyo, and the unit's failure to come up with products that could be released in the near term. I did not realize that Google had a robotics unit in Tokyo as well. That's pretty interesting. I might need to look into that. Tensions between Boston Dynamics and the rest of the Replicant group spilled into open view within Google when Written minutes of a November 11th meeting and several subsequent emails were inadvertently published to an online forum, that was accessible to other Google workers. These documents were made available to Bloomberg News by a Google employee who spotted them. The November meeting was run by Jonathan Rosenberg, an advisor to Alphabet Chief Executive Officer Larry Page, and a former Google Senior Vice President who was temporarily in charge of the replicant group. In the meeting, Rosenberg said, "We, as a startup of our size, cannot spend 30+% of our resources on things that take 10 years, and that there's some time frame that we need to be generating an amount of revenue that covers expenses, and that needs to be just a few years." I was just remembering, too, when they talked about a former Google Senior Vice President who was temporarily in charge of the replicant group. Did we or did we not see the other day that, who is it? I believe it might be Larry Page. Hold on, let's do a quick search. Is now going to help the Pentagon. Let's see. Pentagon, Google's founder. No. So who at Google? Hold on. Google and Pentagon. Eric Schmidt. That's who. Good old Eric Schmidt. Pentagon taps Eric Schmidt to make itself more Google-ish. We might have to read this one next. Secretary of Defense Ash Carter is on a goodwill tour of Silicon Valley this week. Oh, how telling is that? And this was just a few weeks ago, March 2nd. The Pentagon knows that the smartest tech talent gravitates to Northern California these days, and that to stay cutting edge, it needs to court that talent to stay on top of the latest tech trends. To that end, Carter announced plans this morning to establish what he is calling a Defense Innovation Advisory Board, meant to provide advice to the Defense Department from a Silicon Valley point of view. To lead the new board, Carter is tapping someone savvy about the ways of Silicon Valley and the federal government, former Google CEO Eric Schmidt. The Pentagon said the board would advise it on such googly topics as rapid prototyping, iterative product development, business analytics, mobile applications, and the cloud. And in effect, the DoD seemed to be asking Schmidt to help it become more streamlined, efficient, and innovative. Now, the executive chairman of Google's parent company Alphabet, as well as a tech advisor to the president. Oh, I didn't know that either. Oh my God. Schmidt, along with Carter, will pick a dozen individuals from the public and private sector to serve alongside him. The DoD assures that none will be involved in discussions of military operations or strategies. So if we ever needed proof that Google is fully in bed with the federal government and DARPA, there you have it. We have the executive chairman of Alphabet as a tech advisor to the president and as the head of the new Defense Innovation Advisory Board with the Pentagon. And we have multiple DARPA employees working inside Google as well. Along with helping the Pentagon get out in front of the latest developments in technology, the board will also make for some positive optics. Relations between Silicon Valley and the federal government have been especially strained in the recent years, yes, over them wanting everyone to give up their back doors so the government can spy on you. Starting with Edward Snowden's revelations on far-reaching government surveillance programs and extending all the way to Apple's current showdown with the FBI over whether the company should be forced to crack open the San Bernardino shooter's iPhone to give law enforcement access to its data. At the same time, the government needs Silicon Valley more than ever as it seeks to defend from security threats in cyberspace. I told you guys that they were going to use the terrorist hacking under everybody's bed and in everyone's closet to be able to pull this bag closed, put out their arms, and give a big snuggly hug to all of the technology companies as they bring them into the fold. The Pentagon is bulking up its U.S. Cyber Command, and yes, that was started by good old Keith Alexander, aiming to reach 6,200 employees across 133 teams devoted to cyber defense. We have 133 cyber defense teams working for U.S. Cyber Command. That's just amazing. Just today, the Pentagon said that it was inviting white hat hackers to seek vulnerabilities on the Defense Department's public web pages, the first bug bounty program in the history of the federal government. And yeah, we read about that at the time. So, I don't know. What are we going to do? We have all of this stuff happening. It's all merging. We are reaching the singularity. We have Google that's in the middle of all of it. We got Kurzweil, DARPA, the feds. Everybody is working together now, and you and me are the product in the database, and anything that we have done online for the last 15 plus years is probably archived somewhere. Well, here we go. So we have Bill Clinton. We might as well add this in too. We talked about this yesterday, and I've done it before, but we're going to do it again. Let's see if we can find that. Bill Clinton, back in 2011. Remember, this plan's been spinning out here for quite a while. Clinton says, create an internet agency. Bill Clinton doesn't like all the misinformation and the rumors floating around on the internet because, dumb people can't think for themselves. And he thinks that the United Nations or the U.S. government should create an agency that does something about it. It would be a legitimate thing to do, he says in an interview airing Friday on CNBC. The agency, Clinton said, would have to be totally transparent about where the money came from and would have to be independent because if it is a government agency in a traditional sense, it would have no credibility whatsoever, particularly with a lot of the people who are most active on the internet. Oh, you mean like the tech people? Yeah, like the tech people. So let's just involve Google. Let's get Google to write something and be the keeper of the truth, and then we'll just bring Google and their head honcho into the federal government and the Department of Defense to make sure that everything works the way it's supposed to. Let's continue with the story. Let's say the U.S. did it. It would have to be an independent federal agency that no president could countermand or anything else because people wouldn't think you were just censoring the news and giving a different falsehood out, says Clinton. That is, it would be like, I don't know, National Public Radio or BBC or something like that, except it would have to be really independent. That it would not express opinions, and their mandate would be narrowly confined to identifying relevant factual errors, he said. Wow, it sounds like he outlined exactly what Google is doing. And also, they would have to have citations so that they could be checked in case they made a mistake, which that's all about that knowledge base. Somebody needs to be doing it, and maybe it is a worthy expenditure of taxpayer money or of Google's new AI. Interviewed alongside the CEO of a cybersecurity company, Clinton also said that he did not expect a lasting impact from the documents disclosed by WikiLeaks, showing that employees of the State Department, run by his wife, assessing world leaders. This was back at that time, and that's why he was so mad about this, because WikiLeaks had released some private documents where Hillary Clinton, and I don't remember who she was bashing. I know Saudi Arabia got some smashing in there somewhere, and it was pretty embarrassing, and so all of a sudden Bill Clinton decided we need somebody to tamp down on those internet rumors. But remember also in March of 2011, this was May of 2011, the story came out, we had Fukushima happening and news bubbling in the internet that nobody was supposed to be seeing or reading because they were trying to make you forget about it. So tamp down on those internet rumors, said Hillary Clinton at the time. Interviewed alongside a CEO of a cybersecurity company, Clinton has also said that he did not expect a lasting impact from the documents disclosed by WikiLeaks. I do not believe that there is any long-lasting impact on our relationship. People know that we did not leak these on purpose. All right, so now let's fast forward, 4 years into the future, June 30th, 2015. Google's plan to incorporate truthfulness into its search rankings. Google ranking always triggers controversy and debate. This is out of Forbes. Every time there is a new Google algorithm up for release, rumors fly thick and fast as to which type of sites may be penalized and which are likely to be rewarded. Website owners sweat and seethe in anticipation of an update that may push their site into oblivion, and such reactions are not surprising because, as we all know, if you don't show up as the first few results on a given search, then you're practically nobody in the online space. Today, the way things rank on Google have a lot to do with factors like domain authority and social activity. However, everything you find on the internet is not 100% trustworthy. Oh, really? In fact, you can't fully trust even the most popular sites, he says. But why? Well, search engines never include the truth or accuracy as a ranking factor. But if everything goes as Google has planned, this may soon change. Now, are you freaking kidding me? They really are going to do this. Bill Clinton called it. Google's making it happen. And we are just all chummy, butt patting, and I would have to say even rubbing. Maybe some heavy breathing at this point with the feds. Truth is a new ranking factor. Well, for the uninitiated, Google research teams released a report earlier this year proposing a way to rank websites by the veracity of their content instead of their popularity. This means that the more accurate the content, the higher it would appear in the search results. So wait a minute, but didn't we discover that like a lot of the stuff that's been published in the medical journals that had like the green light from the FDA was proven fraudulent or outright false after the fact, but was never retracted? So that, you know, the large majority of the medical studies that are out there that then other studies were based upon that point fingers at people like us, that where they can say, look, you anti-vaxxers are lunatics, but a lot of the research that was out there is very potentially false, doctored, and still out there being used as facts. But how come we're not dealing with important stuff like that as opposed to whether or not a Manx cat has a 6-inch or a 4-inch tail? Please. So anyway, back to the story. What this means is that the more accurate the content, the higher it will appear in the search results. So far, the amount of engagement content can drive as a yardstick for its popularity. Think of tabloid websites, for instance, whose selling point remains gossip and innuendo. Yet many people like to read such content. There are hundreds of sites full of propaganda and link baits that hold the top search spot just because they're popular. Clearly, there is a lot of garbage floating around on the internet in the sea of online content. The new research hints that Google may be on a mission to purge the internet. What does that mean for the web, website owners, and internet users? Like, to purge the internet? Well, let's see. How will Google decide what is true and what is not? Let's see how the Google's truth machine would work. Google has a vast repository, the so-called knowledge vault, of more than 2 billion facts pulled from the internet, which its IT professionals could put to use to form the new algorithm. It would work by checking website pages and content and matching with its database and cross-referencing relevant facts. Websites with high volumes of inaccurate or false data would naturally rank lower in the search results. This way, only trustworthy content would find its deserved place in the top search results. Now, wait a second, though. Right? Who is determining what the truth is? When we have mainstream media lying to us on a daily basis, is Google deciding what is true and what is not? How about when we have anti-media putting out stories exposing corruption, yet that never makes the mainstream news? Is that going to be deemed false data? You better believe it. They are trying to tamp down without allowing anyone to cry foul against the First Amendment and to silence you and me. So how will this change the internet? We should expect a lot of good things to come from this new way of judging web pages, so says Forbes. Some folks manipulate everything from backlinks to social shares to keyword density to get to that first page of Google search. And in the future, hopefully these dark arts, they call them, will vanish as sites are instead screened for truth and accuracy. We live at a time where our purchases, our business practices, our relationships, and even our education depend on our new digital world. Therefore, it is important to be able to feel confident that the content we are reading is trustworthy. As more and more people do the research online and can't think for themselves, I'm going to add tools like this, deployed by Google or not, will be massively important. And the volume of online content is rising at a monstrous speed. And it is very risky to risk your reputation by taking something you find on the web at face value just because it's popular. Well, yeah, and the only way that you would do that is because you never learned what critical thinking was or how to do proper research. I mean, come on, anyone who would just blindly believe some dumb stuff that they found on the internet deserves anything that they get as kickback to that. All right, so where do we go from here? We had talked yesterday about Google also being involved in developing nanotechnology to work along with wearables like your little Fitbit bracelet to be able to detect cancer, to be able to scan your cells. We heard Kurzweil talking about being able to connect directly to the machine with nanobots in our brains, connecting us to the internet. One of Google's divisions, which at the time was called Google X, they've now spun them out into Alphabet, and they have all kinds of different names for the different divisions. It's very possible that this is falling under Verily, because Verily is their health science division, is working on the nanoparticles. They said that you should be able to swallow a pill filled with magnetic nanoparticles that can then attach to your body cells and proteins. That's where we ended the show yesterday. These nanoparticles, which are definitely not nanobots, they said. So, woohoo! Thank goodness, back in, when was this? 2014. I'll bet you they are now. May eliminate illness and aging in the process. Well, there was a story that came out that I wanted to mention from Ars Technica. No, hold on. It was Motherboard magazine. Because we've got to be careful with some of this nanotechnology. I had mentioned this the other day about how they've discovered they can get around the blood-brain barrier with nanotechnology, spoofing biology. And I actually found the story that I had read originally. DNA nanobots can fool the immune system by disguising themselves as viruses. And, you know, this is very much like the way that they are creating GMOs as well to get around traditional GMO technology. I watched a video on that as well from Jennifer Dauda about how they had used viruses to find crevices in the cells, and the viruses are good at doing one thing, and that is invading and then replicating. And that's how they were getting this genetic modification into cells. Well, that's also how they've discovered now they can easily get DNA nanobots into your body. Sometimes to help the body, we just have to fool the body, which is why researchers from Harvard's Weiss Institute of Biologically Inspired Engineering modeled their latest DNA nano device after those great immune system evaders called viruses. And you know, that Weiss Institute is the same home of the robo-bees, and that is a lot of the head of the serpent, a lot of where this is happening. Harvard and MIT is where Eric Drexler was. They were some of the great minds that all came up with nanotechnology to begin with, and they are the ones that are pushing this forward. This whole project, outlined in a new paper published at ACS Nano, is pretty bizarre and cool. Back in February 2012, researchers at Weiss announced that they had developed a robotic device fashioned out of DNA. they described how one day these tiny devices could be used for targeting specific undesirable cells within the body. The DNA bots were shaped like an open barrel whose two halves are closed by a hinge, and when these barrels roll across, say, leukemia or a lymphoma cell, the special DNA latches could recognize the cell surface proteins, and the two halves of the barrel could swing open to deliver the DNA nanobot's payload, which could include molecules with encoded instructions that would interact with specific cells, signaling receptors, and also to give the cells orders to self-destruct. Well, that is the idea anyway. The approach was already modeled on the seek and destroy method of our body's own white blood cells. However, rather than being flattered by the mimicry, the immune system reacted to the DNA nanobots in a pretty hostile manner when they were injected into mice. Wouldn't you think? So when the researchers covered the bots in fluorescent dye and then injected them into the rodents' bloodstreams, the bots showed up glowing in their bladders pretty quickly. They were getting caught, filtered, and marked for expulsion. So that led us to ask, how could we protect our little DNA nanobots from getting chewed up and recognized as foreign invaders by the immune system? Well, the solution was to model the DNA nanobots after something that had more experience in fooling the immune system. So the whole white blood cell inspired DNA nano devices got a virus inspired cloaking device. So they took nanobots and then they put them into a virus payload. They also are doing that, if you remember when we read all about that brand new Gardasil 9 vaccine, in the pamphlet they had talked about the virus-like particles, and when we dug into how that vaccine was actually working, that's what they were doing. They had made these synthetic virus-like particles and then put nanoparticles or nano something that went and did the same sorts of things where it could recognize, search, and destroy as a payload inside of the synthetic virus-like particle. Anyway, it says they enclosed the nano devices in a solid protein case, and the researchers then made tiny DNA handles upon which they could hang lipids to create an oily coating like the kind that viruses use to evade the immune system. The result was a very virus-like DNA bot. Now let that sink in for a minute, because that just gave me chills. When the coated nano devices were injected into mice, their whole little bodies were glowing for hours, indicating that the nano devices were sticking around as long as effective drugs do. DNA is a natural, biocompatible, and biodegradable material, which gives DNA nanotechnology a widely recognized potential as a delivery mechanism for drugs and molecular signals. Researchers are learning how to better program DNA-based nano devices that could one day help the body more effectively fight disease. And there is something almost poetic about how a nano device mimics its target in order to more effectively fight it. It's maybe not as viscerally thrilling as a robot cheetah running faster than a Usain Bolt, but it's also not as unnerving as one modeled after a blue sea slug. Well, says you, because it's very unnerving to me. We're going to have these little nanobots that are mimicking biology made out of DNA and made to look like a virus that could just easily slip into your body undetected and do things without your knowledge. All right, guys, well, we are just about out of time. Make sure you stick around because it is Friday. Ms. Lonnie Clark is live up next. And then tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern, Josh live at 8, private time with the boys, Michael and Nick, from this week's show. 9 o'clock, Truth on the Tracks. 10, Cutting Through the Matrix this week, and live at 11 p.m. Anti-Media Radio with Levon. All right, guys, make sure you have an awesome Friday and weekend, and I will catch up with you on Monday. Take care.
We will connect wirelessly our neocortex to the cloud.
This is with nanobots that
Exactly.
that enter your neocortex.
Right.
This is your prediction. For when? When is that?
Well, June 2033.
Yeah. June 12th, 8:35 in the morning.
So we have 300 million modules in our neocortex, each of which can recognize a pattern. They're organized in this hierarchy. We create that hierarchy with our own thinking. But it's 300 million. So is that a big number or a little? Well, it was big enough for us to invent language and physics. But it's also limited when you realize how long it takes to read a book or learn a language. We will be able to expand that. And that expansion will not be a one-shot deal. It'll be connected to the cloud. The cloud is pure information technology. One of my themes is that information technology grows exponentially. It roughly doubles in power every year. That's what the cloud is doing. The cloud is twice as powerful every year. And when we can connect and expand our neocortex in the cloud, it will expand without limit. And so we'll be funnier, and we'll be sexier, and it'll be harder for you to win this prize again.
So just to clarify what I think you just said, that in 20 years, plus or minus, so the mid-2030s, we will have nanobots that we can feed into our brain that directly connect to the cloud rather than through anything we carry in our pocket. And in that way, wirelessly, we can basically download entire books, entire languages, and we will then know these things just by the act of downloading them.
Well, that's one implication.
Into our brains.
But we'll have more neocortex. So we won't be limited to a mere 300 million pattern modules. We'll have billions or 10 billion.
What, biologically, or just simply because we have these nanobots?
We'll have this extension that's non-biological.
Non-biological, right. So
I mean, this would be pretty useless if it didn't have an extension. I mean, when you access all of Google...
Yes, it would just be a gaming device otherwise, right.
You can access all of knowledge and...
No, I got that. So isn't this like the scene in The Matrix where they sit in the chair and they upload... One of my favorite lines of the film is Keanu Reeves. They teach him martial arts, and he says, "I know kung fu." And you mean I'm gonna know, or jujitsu, whatever. So in 20 seconds, he's now an expert. Are you telling me that's what's going to happen?
The non-biological portion of our thinking will be able to download skills, right?
Wow.
And it does that now. I mean, you load some software in your computer. It didn't. For example, speech recognition, which I worked on. We had to spend months teaching a computer how to understand human speech. But now you want to do that on your notebook computer, you just download the software. It can download skills that another computer learned. So that's a feature of non-biological intelligence.